Hi, I'm John Killick, former bank robber turned writer. You might remember me as the guy who broke out of jail in a helicopter, hijacked by my then girlfriend. That escape generated quite a few headlines and landed me back in prison. Well, tonight's story is about another bank robber I met when I was back in jail. A guy called Russell Mansour, and his rap sheet was even longer than mine. But after he confronted some troubling events in his past, life took an unexpected turn.
I remember the first time I walked through these gates. I was a 17-year-old kid, and it was my first time in an adult prison. I'd heard a lot of stories about prison. It looked like a very harsh environment. You know, the smell of tobacco, just everywhere you went, you could just smell it. I was terrified. I was scared as I'd never felt fear like that ever in my life. Something happened to me on the first night in prison, and it haunted me for the rest of my life. I think it played a big part in destroying my life. You know why? I don't use it as a justification why I went down the wrong path, but I just couldn't escape it. It was like a rocket ship. I just couldn't jump off it.
Russell Mansour was essentially a career criminal. He had caused other people to be frightened, if not terrified.
Situation at Campsie where 3 dangerous escapees have escaped from a prison van.
The escapees were identified as 22-year-old Russell Mansour, having a history of armed robberies and escapes.
Perhaps the most remarkable thing about his story is just how improbable it was that with his background, he was going to break this entire cycle. I think I might have said to him at one stage, Russell, you've got a 1 in a million shot of doing this.
We don't have to get trapped on this cycle. You know, we can make choices, and choices that are going to work well for us.
Russell once said to me, you know, I'm a good guy that's done bad things, but I knew he was always in there. He was always that type of a person that would help.
I'm not asking for people to forgive me. There's a lot of me that is ashamed about what I did to other people. There's a lot. But I hope that people, when they hear my story, can realise that people can change.
I've known Russell about 10 years. I met him at Narra jail. Russell exudes confidence, but he has his demons.
Hey, bro.
Hey, bro. Hello.
I know that at times he gets depressed, so every day he tries to get to the gym, just about every day. It's important to Russell too, because what happened to him when he was younger happened because he was defenseless in a way. He wasn't very big, wasn't very strong, and he never wants to be vulnerable like that again.
You know, I still have a lot of prison dreams, but for me, exercise is the best antidepressant there is. I'm in a really good headspace at the moment, and I'm not going to let my past define me. This is Mount Druitt, western suburbs of Sydney. Sold to earth-type people, and you know, I have fond memories of growing up here. I don't know, I wouldn't want to grow up anywhere else. I love the people of this area.
In those days, Mount Druitt was a very poor area. It was very diverse. One end of the street you'd have a bank robber who went to jail, and then a couple of doors down you've got, you know, the captain of the Australian Socceroos team.
My mum worked in a plastic factory and done night shift, and my dad worked in a factory. They believed in working hard to get anything you wanted in life.
I've known Russell since I was around the age of 5. He was just a happy kid, like one of us. But he started hanging out with a different crowd once we got to that teenage years.
As I got older, you'd see blokes come home from prison and they were like return war heroes, you know. And the next minute they got the best car in the driveway, they got the big TV, and they turned up. They'd have a glove box full of the $1 and $2 notes. They would say, you know, young Russell, come here, and they'd give me a handful, like it'd be like $40 or $50 in $1 notes, and that was like, you know, that was like a fortune back then. And, you know, I wanted to be like these guys. With the benefit of hindsight, you know, I can really see how sad that was, you know. But these guys treated me like big brothers.
I'd come down here of an afternoon, talk to the boys, and the boys would come out from jail, the other boys would come out from the boys' homes, and we'd all pool knowledge, and you'd learn all different techniques out of whether it be steal a car or rob a bank or break into an apartment store. This is where I learned it all. This is where I done my apprenticeship.
One day I was walking home with a friend and a shiny RX-7 sports car pulled up. It was Russell. Russell says, hop in, Sezzy, come on, I'll give you a lift home. So, you know, thinking, should I get in this car, should I not? My girlfriend's like, yes, we're in. So she, you know, we're in the car before I know I'm in a stolen car, really. I thought to myself, this is not going to end well.
I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I was just one of these kids that was just searching to have a good time, to have some fun, because, you know, life seemed boring at the time. My family were really dirty on me when I first started getting into trouble, you know, because none of my family had ever been in any trouble with the law. They were always encouraging me to get some help.
When Russell was 15, he and another guy had stole a car. They were involved in a chase, smashed the car, and he was arrested, and they put him in a place called Durrock.
I felt really scared about going to Durrock Boys Home because I'd heard whispers about what was going on there. The first night I got to Durrock, I seen staff grabbing kids out of beds and taking them into the ablutions block. About second or third night I was there, one of the staff members, firstly I could smell him breathing on me, and he had breath like a sewer. And he told me to wake up, and then marched me into the ablutions block, and then sexually abused me. It made me feel ashamed, it made me feel embarrassed, it made me feel unmanly. And from that moment onwards, it was like having a massive big hole in my heart.
People like Russell complained, even complaining to women who worked there in the laundry and they just wouldn't believe it and told him, don't come to me with that sort of stuff. So this is very frustrating and it just destroys people.
It wasn't long after I got out of Durrock that I started stealing luxury cars. I got arrested for stealing a Porsche from Whale Beach, and the judge sentenced me to 12 months in prison and stipulated that it be served in an adult prison. The judge stated that it was would serve as a deterrent from kids from Mount Druitt stealing Porsches from affluent areas.
He was 17 when he went into Long Bay. And he put him in what's called one wing, it's a protection wing. And some of the most vile criminals in the state were there. He was just a young, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, and he was thrown in a cell with two pedophiles.
Two officers put me in a cell. They put a mattress on the floor, and as they were leaving, they said to the two blokes in the cell, "Have fun, boys." That night, I was sexually abused.
A couple of days later, there was another bloke who sexually abused me as well. And after it, he said to me, "Look, don't say nothing." And he said, "I'll give you this." It was a shot of heroin, and he introduced me to heroin, you know. From the moment I tried heroin, I just loved it. That void that I had from the abuse was filled straight away. So I come out of there a very angry young man, a very hurt young man, and, you know, and a drug-dependent young man.
Within a few years, he's addicted to heroin, and he needed to be able to support the drug habit, and he started going for serious money.
In the early 90s, I robbed 5 banks. I got 90,000 from the Lone Cove Commonwealth. You could buy a house in Mount Druitt for 25 grand back those days, you know, it was a lot of money.
Even though Russell never physically hurt anybody, the violence associated with the possibility was still quite traumatic for the victims of that crime. When someone's pointing a gun at you, the feeling, you know, people freeze and relive that memory over and over again. The screaming and yelling, you know, give me the money, it's quite a confronting situation for someone to be in.
I never really stopped to see what the reaction was. Because I was so messed up in my own head, I was so badly desensitised of what had happened to me, you know, I didn't think people had feelings because I didn't. What I'd done was terrible. And for a long time, I didn't realise that. I was 23 when I was arrested, and I was eventually sentenced to 15 years with a non-parole period of 7.5 years.
He used to run the place in a very tight manner where everyone had to, he was like the king of the place, really.
Yeah.
I first met Russell when he was in custody, when he started his first really big sentence, and I was, at the time, running the education programs in one of the jails at Long Bay.
How long had you been here for?
I've been here for a couple of years at that stage,
Yeah.
but I'm still learning. And,
Yeah.
By that stage, he'd had a very extensive record, you know, stealing cars, more serious forms of robbery, and a couple of escapes.
This is one of the rooms that you went into to check on your progress every Thursday.
Yeah.
I remember that, and you'd sit around here with David Swartz and a couple of the other officers, and they'd tell you how well you're going or how bad you're going, and in some cases, you know, they were telling you you're going, you're getting kicked out.
I'm not blaming you, all I'm just saying is I've tried to talk, I've approached you to talk about it. You know
Russell, there's nothing to talk about, just do better.
I ran a 3-month program called the Special Care Unit at Long Bay Jail.
All things considered.
A program that focused on behaviors that got people into trouble constantly.
No, you're the one who seems to concentrate on all the bad. No, that's how it has been with me and you this time. I don't know what your problem is.
Russell came into the program as a hard-talking kid from the West who was tough. He at least acted tough.
You got to work harder. Look, I know what's going on here. You're saying you're booting me, all right, sweet. But why can't you be a bit up front with me? I see you as a bit of a coward, David. I really do. Bullshit.
Russell never talked about his abuse.
What are your concerns, David? What are your concerns? My concern.
He was very defensive in certain areas, afraid of getting hurt.
When I do the good, you've never, ever praised me for it.
The program was very intense, and he just could not meet those demands.
Well, I hope at some other time you'll try again. No. No?
By that stage with my abuse, I'd become so accustomed to putting on a facade of everything's okay, and those feelings, I didn't want to engage in them. I had them tucked away. So it was really, really confronting, you know. It was really painful, and I think he might have been scratching the surface.
Yeah, shit, David, you're full of shit. This program is full of shit. That's what it is. It's full of shit. He's a hypocrite. He's a bad liar. He just sets you up for failure all the time. That's what he's with. Another day in jail.
I used to go and visit Russell in Long Bay. I definitely got the feeling he was battling his own demons. I just put it down to perhaps drugs at the time. I was trying to encourage him to bring out himself, like who he was, really.
So you're not independent, are you, mate?
Russell eventually presented himself to the program, and the second time there was something different. What it was, I don't know, except perhaps the willingness to listen and engage.
I don't want to rely on my family and friends. I want to be responsible for myself in everyday life.
There was less hustle about him, and that was the beginning of what seems to have been a rather significant change.
I just didn't want to keep repeating that cycle. My plans from there on in was always to get out and live a productive life.
I can remember when there was a whole heap of us had an interest in doing some sort of fitness qualification, and we took it to you.
We provided vocational skills, and Russell was highly motivated to do something. He was one of those people who really wanted to learn. He wanted to take advantage of every opportunity that he had.
I heard from Russell when he got out of jail around 2004, maybe 2005. He'd become a gym instructor and he'd started his own business and doing really well. Met a girl and they had 2 boys, and I just thought to myself, Russell's finally got his life on track. But it was just on the surface.
For a long time, I was clean and sober, but, you know, I was still fighting my demons on the inside. I started drinking, and then it started to unpack the suitcase of all the stuff that I'd suppressed. And I started hanging out with an old mate, and we were using a lot of drugs, and it wasn't long until my life fell apart completely again.
His marriage split up, stuffed up the marriage. Then he found himself going in and out of hospitals, mental hospitals and rehabs. He was starting to have hallucinations, thinking people were after him. He finished up turning to crime again as well.
January 2014, I led an investigation into a number of bank robberies in Sydney. Bank robberies were sort of a dying art form for criminals, with security and changing amounts of cash that was available. But Russell was desperate. In one case, he stuck his finger under his jacket to make it look like he had a firearm. In some of those robberies, he was apologising to the victims whilst he was doing them, which is, you know, unusual. He appeared to be a person that was at the end of the line, who was ready to be caught.
When I was arrested, I ended up in the police station, and I kept on seeing these blinds come down and a pair of eyes staring at me, and all just young coppers, and it was like they'd never seen a bank robber before, and I was like a Tasmanian tiger. It was the first time they'd ever seen a Tasmanian tiger, and I was at a stage in my life at that point in time that I just wanted to end it.
In 2014, when he did go back to jail, I do think that was rock bottom for Russell, and he really needed to address why he was feeling the way that he did.
I was watching TV and a report came on. It was about the Royal Commission into Institution Responses to Child Sexual Abuse.
The outgoing Archbishop of Sydney, Cardinal George Pell, is being questioned about his role in the Church's vigorous defence of child sex abuse claims.
Previously, I'd been let down by the authority figures who I did try to report my abuse to, but when I saw the head of the Catholic Church, George Pell, getting questioned about church cover-ups, you know, it gave me a lot of faith. It gave me a lot of faith that my story may be believed.
Russell wrote to the Royal Commission. They then had a private session with him. He detailed the sexual abuse that he suffered and the impact that it's had on his life.
He had developed post-traumatic stress disorder, recurrent intrusive distressing memories, panic attacks, generalised anxiety, depression, hypervigilance, truly debilitating disease.
He was able to negotiate an outcome of compensation, but also a letter of acknowledgement and apology from the New South Wales government.
I got this apology letter, and a line that really stood out with it for me. And it says, "I acknowledge the impact the abuse has had and continues to have on your adult life." After receiving this, I felt validated, you know, and someone was making sense and taking ownership of the madness.
The Royal Commission process was a really long process. I was making regular phone calls to them, and there's normally 50 blokes in a prison yard, and everyone knows what everyone's talking about. If you get labelled with a tag of a police informer or a dog, it could cost you your life. I had to make a disclosure to the whole yard. I said, I'm not talking to the police or anything. I'm talking to Royal Commission Institutional Responses to Sexual Abuse. I said, I'm talking about abuse that happened to me because it's ruining my life. It's been ruining my life for a long time.
Other people started coming up to him and sharing their story of the abuse that they had suffered and that they had never spoken about.
And I just put them in contact with, with the Royal Commission, and that's when, a big seed was planted in me too, to see that I could help these people.
It's really important for people to have a sense that they can be a better person. I think that was really important for Russell to imagine a future for himself where he was accepted by the community.
But in 2017, just weeks before he was due to be released, Russell was charged with a series of New South Wales armed bank robberies committed before the offences for which he was serving his time. We were able to secure him bail.
Russell was admitted to a rehabilitation centre, Adele House in Coffs Harbour, where he really did attempt to address his addiction issues, and that's been an ongoing battle for Russell. He was still approached by survivors of abuse who had heard his story. Russell was referring survivors of abuse to different law firms for legal advice, and that's when I met him. When he got out of rehab, he set up a small business. The business is a support and advocacy service to refer survivors of abuse for rehabilitation or treatment or legal advice about compensation.
I started the business on a barbecue table in my little one-bedroom unit at Coffs Harbour with a laptop computer and just myself, and I didn't even know how to use that laptop computer. Eventually, we moved into a fully operational office.
Morning.
Russell worked, and he worked pretty hard building this business up. Taking phone calls at 2 and 3 in the morning. Particularly people in jail. He was the guy they wanted to talk to because legal people didn't believe him before. But when they got someone like Russell who's been there and done the same things they've done, they feel good and they'll go with him on it.
Majority of our clients are former prisoners or prisoners themselves. We refer them off to one of our lawyers that we work with to see if the lawyer believes that they have a viable case.
We give some initial advice in relation to options such as redress, which is a capped amount of monetary assistance through the National Redress Scheme. They can do that themselves, but people who are prisoners or have been sentenced to over 5 years, they may not be entitled to redress. There's a further assessment process, so some people choose civil litigation.
Often we will take the initial report, the abuse report. We charge a fee for taking the statement and supporting the client throughout the whole process. We do welfare checks on them. So what are you doing to be looking after yourself there?
I've been going to a counsellor now for 9 months.
Yeah.
I first met Russell in 2004 in jail in Queensland. I was serving a sentence of 19 years at the time for armed robbery, and a lot of that was my attitude to self and the world. I didn't grow up with a lot of care, and I didn't extend a lot of care. I was made a ward of the state when I was around 11 years old, and I was in institutions from that age until 16, and it was during the course of those years that I was a victim of sexual abuse and physical abuse.
Hiding something away for so many years and pretending it didn't happen did damage too.
Yeah.
I kept the story for most of my life.
That shame and all of those horrible feelings that is attached to that anxiety and that, they belong to you. They actually belong to the perpetrator themselves, you know, and we can never forget that.
I think that the greatest help that I got from Russell was that the abuse wasn't my fault.
If you're struggling at all, mate, like always, you've got my number. You know, being part of someone's healing process is so rewarding, you know. In my life, I've done a lot of bad things myself, you know, and it's really pleasing to be a part of that. All right, mate, you take care.
See you, mate.
He was just getting on the front foot for the first time. However, there were these criminal charges that he still hadn't answered to, and that he could go back to jail, in which case this could all come crashing down.
The day I went to court was, I'd say it was a really emotional day for me that day, because my life hung in the balance.
I wrote a pre-sentence report. I told the court that his criminal offending was a direct, unequivocal consequence of being sexually abused and physically abused and emotionally abused. I formed the view that the prospect of him reoffending was remote.
I was sincerely apologetic for the trauma that I'd caused the victims of my crimes, and I fully come to understand the impact that my actions had on victims themselves. I explained how my life had changed, and I told the judge that I believed that I had a purpose in life, and that was doing the work that I'm doing. And it was pretty amazing what he had to say.
The judge came to the view ultimately that Russell had passed the crossroads, that he was rehabilitated and that he was on the right path.
I was blown away and so relieved that I wasn't going to have to return to prison. I just wanted to be able to get on with my life, you know. We've been operational for 5 years now. It hasn't been smooth sailing. People have been trying to suggest that we've been doing things untoward, which is really hurtful.
What do you say to the idea that you're claim farming, approaching people in order to get business, and that you cold call survivors?
We don't have to claim farm. People are approaching us. We don't have to do that. But, you know, not for 1 second would I say we made any mistakes. We had people that were working with us that were doing some unscrupulous things. One bloke in particular sent out a whole heap of pamphlets to different prisons and that. You know, there was a suggestion that they'd offered money for referrals, but that was done by an employee who's no longer with us, who actually got the sack over that.
I think that a mistake had been made, and we've been very clear that we can only and will only assist people that have approached Russell's organisation directly and asked for assistance.
You've been accused of taking kickbacks or commissions from law firms of several $1,000s for referring prisoners.
No, we don't do that. We actually invoice for a report, right, and the support that we provide the survivor. We've created something that, for people who would never talk with lawyers, we've created an opportunity for them to get justice as well. We haven't broken the law in doing what we're doing. But I just think, for me, I've been under attack because I'm that guy that should be in Long Bay, get my name called off muster every night. That's where these people want me in my place. They see me as being out of my lane. I ain't going nowhere. I'm here to stay. Come up and down these stairs a fair few times. I've got a lot of plans for the future. I really want to get actively involved in helping people in prison get proper rehabilitation. Dealing with trauma and getting skills and reintegrating back in the community. I want to play a part in that. My name's Russell and I grew up at Mount Druitt, and
Sort of got into trouble when I was like 14 years old and ended up in a boys' home out west.
I've asked Russell to come and speak to prisoners, and I've asked him to come and speak to staff about his experience, because it's fantastic to learn from people who've managed to move beyond their criminal life.
For me, the change sort of took place where, you know, I had to take ownership of my actions, you know what I mean? I was like...
Russell, like most humans, he's a complex human being. He's not all good and he's not all bad.
Look, mate, I'm not a criminal mastermind. I've done 23 years in jail. I sort of accept that maybe I'm not good at it, you know what I mean?
Russell does continue to struggle. As an addict, there's times when he will be off the grid and take himself to in-house rehabilitation centres to ensure that he stays well.
For us blokes, it's hard for us to put our hands up and ask for help.
I do a lot of Narcotics Anonymous meetings because I understand that I'm an addict for life and I've always got to address it.
Russell's had some ups and downs in the last few years, but he doesn't feel a failure. He doesn't feel that he's just been another useless crim.
There's nothing in that old life that appeals to me, nothing, not one thing. I want a good, peaceful life, and so I'm hell-bent on making the right choices.